The message is this: there is a finite pool of money. If there isn't, please let me and all the legislators know. There's a finite pool of money. And so when you take money, some of that money away and divert it over here, there are other things that will suffer. So what is going to happen in the area of stem cell research? If you take money, as has been proposed in the state of Florida and, of course, California, and you take $200 million to fund embryonic stem cell research, you are taking money away from the progress being made today in the clinic for adult stem cells. You're not encouraging, you're not speeding up cures, you're slowing down cures. And that is an important business message that I think needs to be driven home. So what are some of the media myths? And again, I think I get so aggravated because I was watching, was it 2020, a couple months ago, and they were interviewing some investigators at Stanford about embryonic stem cell research and heart disease. And not once did they say about the trials that are underway with adult stem cells. It was never said. Stem cells can only come from embryos. That's not true. We've talked about that. Religious factions are against stem cell research. This is not a religious issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is a human issue. And it's unfortunate that every time there's a debate, they have a scientist and a clergyman. They've never thought, or maybe never tried, to find another scientist who doesn't quite agree with that view. And so they have set this up, whether you know it or not, as a religious front to embryonic stem cell research. The fact that it holds the best promise, saying it 100 times that embryonic stem cell research holds a promise for cures, saying it 1,000 times doesn't make it so. The facts need to speak for themselves. It is not against the law, and this is probably one of the bigger ones. I read in a blog the other day, some woman said, when she heard about the stem cells for heart disease, she said, "I'm so glad I fought for it in my state." And I wrote back and said, it was never illegal to begin with. It is not illegal to use embryonic stem cells. These companies can do it. It is illegal to use federal funding for embryonic stem cells. So if you have private money and you believe in it, go at it, please. And the other one that kind of aggravates me is that Bush is the bad guy here, that he created the restrictions. In I think it was 96, the Dickey Amendment is under Clinton's administration said that federal funding could not be used for embryonic stem cells. That's when it was stated. What Bush did is he opened the door. Excuse me. I was disappointed that he opened the door, but you know what happens when you open the door. So now, because the door is open and everybody wants more, he's the bad guy, and they believe he's the one blocking and creating and blocking restrictions. Therapeutic and reproductive cloning are fundamentally the same. That is not so. Cloning is cloning. Again, another talk. You go through the exact same procedure to get that embryo to 5 to 7 days. Exact same procedure. At that time, you decide, will I implant this in a woman's uterus, or will I take it and take the cells out of it for embryonic stem cells? It is exactly the same. So to say that they're different is, again, a way of trying to make you feel differently about this. And as I said before, the use of the word therapeutic is horrible because the cloning is coming from the embryo that you're destroying, so that sure isn't therapeutic to the embryo, to the donor, if you will. CSNC is the same thing. We talked about that. Because it's the same thing, it does require an embryo. Every cell in the body is somehow an embryo, and this is life. I know you've heard it. People say, oh, well, if you're trying to stop embryonic stem cell research, well, then when I wash my hands, I'm killing embryos. No. The only thing that can be, well, I've heard it, I've read it. And it's because of this idea, and I don't fault these people. Again, the information isn't, and the education isn't being given to people. The embryo is a self-fulfilling cell that we talked about. And the only way that skin cells or any other cells of the body come into play is if you take the DNA out of those cells, you put it in an egg, and it's only in that environment. When you do that, it becomes an embryo. So it's the source of DNA. It is not an embryo. And finally, it's acceptable to destroy embryos that may be discarded. I have a problem with that because Again, it's discriminatory of when can you destroy the embryo, when can you can't. If it's human life, it's human life. Probably a comparable situation is to say, well, hopefully nobody agrees with this, but people on death row, they're going to die. Let's inject them with something we haven't really tried in animals or anything else because, they're going to die. We might as well use them for research. It's not acceptable because they're human beings. It's not acceptable because they're going to be discarded or frozen or whatever. It's just not acceptable. So I'd like to leave you with, I guess I've gone over, with a couple of quotes. Francis Collins, Dr. Collins is a very brilliant man. He's the geneticist who was the director of the Human Genome Project. That's the project that mapped all the human genes. It took about 10 years, but remarkable project, remarkable man. And he's a scientist, but he's also been able to bring God into his work. And I find that in science, you either see God more in your work or you see that there's no reason for God because you're learning more and more on your own. And I even had a comment made to me by a physician. He said, as soon as we discover all there is to know, there'll be no need for a God. And it's sad, but it's because, we as a scientist, we get so involved in our work, we fail to look at the whole picture again because there's more than just science. But these are two quotes from Francis Collins, I think, who has it right as a scientist. The dignity of a human being should not be compromised by what about them would be interesting to explore. And we are being thought of as machines, and of course this comes because of all the work he did with the human genome. That we are DNA and that's all we are. And that is not the conclusion I draw. Science is not going to render free will obsolete. It is not a moral judger. And it will not shed light on what it means to love someone. Finally, I think if we are really here in this world to try to advance life, whether it be physical, mental, spiritual, psychological, if our mission is to advance life, we must not jeopardize it in the name of progress. Thank you.